Hey friends, and welcome back to the Diving Deeper podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Liebforth. I'm a follower of Christ, husband to Megan, and dad to Mac. We're diving deep into our 9th episode of our Bible in a Year plan, where we walk week by week from a 50,000-foot overview of Scripture. And what we're going to be diving into today is Leviticus 24 through 27, Hebrews 9 through 13, Psalm 81, 112, and 64, and Numbers 1 through 7. So why don't we just dive in? Leviticus 24 starts like this. There's these regulations that are concerning the lampstand, the bread of the presence, as well as blasphemy laws. Leviticus 25, we have the instructions for the Sabbath year and the year of Jubilee, which is emphasizing God's provision, his rest, and justice. Then we have Leviticus 26, promises of blessings for obedience and warnings of curses for disobedience. This is underscoring the importance of covenant fidelity. Leviticus 27, we have regulations concerning vows, the redemption of devoted things, and this is highlighting the sanctity of offerings to the Lord. And what Leviticus does is it concludes with regulations concerning sacred spaces, time, and vows, reinforcing the principles of holiness and devotion to God. Then we're going to jump over to Hebrews. We'll start with 9 and through 13. Hebrews 9, it's the earthly and heavenly tabernacles are contrasted here in this chapter. And what it does is it emphasizes the once-for-all sacrifice of Christ. Hebrews 10, we see Christ's sacrifice compared to the inadequacy of animal sacrifices, urging believers to persevere in faith. Hebrews 11, it's the Hall of Faith, which showcases examples of Old Testament heroes who lived by faith. Hebrews 12, there's encouragement to endure trials and pursue holiness, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. And lastly, Hebrews 13, it's the exhortations for Christian living, including love and hospitality, as well as submission to spiritual leaders. See, what Hebrews does is it presents Christ as the fulfillment of Old Testament and of the Old Testament, urging believers to hold fast to their confession and live lives of faith and obedience. We'll jump over to Psalm 81, then we'll go to 112 and 64. See, the only reason I'm going a little out of order per se is because that's just where it lines up in our week. So Psalm 81, it's this call to worship, call to obedience, and there's a reminder in here of God's past faithfulness and Israel's disobedience. Psalm 112 is the blessings of the righteous, including fear of the Lord, prosperity, and a lasting legacy. And lastly, Psalm 64. It's a cry for deliverance from enemies, expressing confidence in God's justice and protection. So we kind of see these themes of worship, of protection, divine protection, of righteousness, of obedience. And what this does is it's highlighting the blessings of those who trust in the Lord. And let's end with Numbers 1 through 7. 1 through 4, it's kind of this long segment of the census of the Israelites, the organization of the camp, and the duties of the Levites in the tabernacle. Numbers 5 is the laws concerning purity and restitution for wrongdoing, including the test for adultery. Numbers 6, the vow of the Nazirite and the priestly blessing. And then lastly, Numbers 7. It's the offerings of the leaders for the dedication of the altar, emphasizing their willingness to serve God. So in Numbers, we see God's provision for order and for worship in the wilderness, as well as his desire for purity and dedication among his people. That's all we got this week, friends. Thanks for joining me again for this 50,000-foot overview of these sections of Scripture. I hope that you join me as we dive deeper in our day-to-day routine as we're scouring what God has for us to learn in his word. And I hope that you learn something as you listen to this podcast where we are looking at the intersection of beliefs with culture and seeing how that plays out from a biblical perspective. Have a great week, friends. God bless.